Welcome to another edition of Trailer Talk TV. Today we've got Joe from Microsoft Advertising in the office. Joe, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
And today we're talking about the cookieless future, basically, and what Microsoft is building around that, Microsoft Advertising, I should say, around that. Joe, before we do that, can you just give us a quick intro to you, people who don't know you, just a quick intro and what you do in Microsoft Advertising?
Yes, so I'm a solutions architect at MSA, or Microsoft Advertising. Used to be part of Xandr. Xandr was acquired by Microsoft and is now integrated within Microsoft Advertising.
Yeah.
So basically, Xandr's platforms have become Microsoft's ad tech platforms, essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
My work is focusing on our publisher partners and facilitating anyone who's basically using sell side. Mm-hmm. And my basic goal is to ensure success today, but also ensuring that the solutions that we're developing for the future, and basically 2024 and beyond, I want to ensure that these solutions are being used by our partners as much as possible. Okay.
So before we jump into sort of what you guys are doing, we'll talk about sort of the lay of the land, right? Everybody's talking about cookieless solutions and the post-cookie sort of future and post-ID, post-signal, post-everything. But I want to get your sense from someone who's actually in the weeds around this stuff. Just give us a sense of what's going on, particularly around the programmatic execution and activation side.
Yeah, let's do that. So let me start with a bit of a quick design that I want to kind of illustrate.
Yeah.
So today, what SSPs and DSPs are doing is they are both using loads of signals, right?
Yeah.
Let's call these signals. You've got a list of things here. So you've got things like the publisher or URLs, you've got the sizes, geo, etc., and so forth.
Yeah.
But the main thing that's allowing for cross-domain tracking is the third-party cookie.
Yeah.
We all know this in the industry, and the risk today is that, well, firstly, this is diminishing in terms of scale. We know this.
Yeah.
And in the next year, we're going to start seeing this diminish even more and more to the point where it's going to be blocked by default eventually in Chrome, which is the biggest web browser. So what's happening today is people are moving towards the signals 2024 and beyond version. And we're seeing a lot of the same stuff here. So the same stuff is being used. And starting to replace this with other signals that are aiming to not replace like for like, but add value to the marketer and both to the publisher.
Yeah.
So you've got things like PPID here, which is what we've discussed previously with you guys. You'll have things like industry IDs. So here you can have things like the logged in IDs or deterministic IDs, whatever you want to call them. Basically, these are first-party identifiers that are consented, deterministic, tied to something that's maybe PII, like the login. And then this is probably not as much used at length today, but will potentially be in the future, privacy sandbox signals.
Which is an interesting one. Probably it needs a 4 or 5 Trailer Talks on its own.
Yes, yeah. We've all seen all these graphs attempting to explain and simplify it, but reality is
nobody really knows.
Yeah, as someone in the weeds, we're still quite far, I would say.
Right.
Privacy sandbox, and then this is an interesting one: audience and context taxonomy. So these are signals provided by the publisher. So essentially, sell-side segments built by publishers. So imagine things like cohorts. Yeah. So the idea is, the layout of land today is, we're all aware this is going away. How do we plan for this? How do we set up solutions for this?
So talk about Microsoft Advertising, how it activates these new signals across third-party supply, obviously, because you're used across your own inventory, but like extensively across third-party sites as well.
Exactly. So the ideal scenario that we're thinking of today and for the future is, this is great, but what if we also add first-party data on top of all of this, or around all of this, to enhance or give an option to someone who doesn't have as much data, who doesn't have any data, both as a marketer and as a publisher. So let's move around here and represent or illustrate what Microsoft data actually is. So let's think of a wider circle here, white circle that has 4 pillars. Microsoft is, I'm just going to call it MSFT here. Has a lot of assets, proprietary assets. You've got gaming. So think of Xbox here. Social, think of LinkedIn. You know, maybe business or social.
Yeah.
But basically both business and social use cases. You've got browsing, so the browser, Edge, which is a pretty big browser in the world, number 3 ranked. And you've got the general doing of things. So imagine things like searching on Bing, for example. Very important for data and search intent and things like that. As well as Microsoft Publisher for news sources like MSN, as well as Outlook.
So owned and operated inventory as well.
Owned and operated inventory. So this is all O&O inventory, actually. And the idea is this actually represents, to our estimation, 1 billion consented users that are interacting on a regular basis with the Microsoft O&O. And this is great because we get to accumulate a lot of data on these users in terms of what their behavior is in terms of search intent. Search is actually really important for marketing use cases, especially at the end of the funnel, as well as contextual data, where people are spending time, and demographic data. Because in some cases here, we have a login, so we have a bit of an insight into the user.
First-party data. But then, obviously, that first-party data, logged-in data, doesn't necessarily translate across to third-party sites. Like, what do you do with that data? Like, do you do lookalike modeling, or what way do you kind of extrapolate sort of these signals that can be used in third-party scenarios?
Yes. So modeling is going to be really key, we believe, and we've developed solutions around it. But let me first kind of illustrate how this is going to look like. How this is actually looking like today, as of October or November. So as of October last year, so 2023. All these segments, let's just call them like segments here, were only available on Microsoft O&O, so first-party supply. What we've done in October / November is launched this on third-party supply. So anyone who's connected to us, connected to Microsoft Monetize or Microsoft Invest, so our DSP or SSP, we can now essentially correlate the user from here to here. So anyone here can benefit from the data that we've accumulated over time. If you think of search intent data, think of demographic data. So we're giving an option to buyers that wanted access to differentiated data. We're giving them that option to essentially start using Microsoft data that's kind of unique to the ecosystem, that is kind of new as well as a whole, because it was only previously available here. So those are what we call Microsoft in-market segments. Stable data. You mentioned modeled, right? So how do we expand? Because in the future, we're going to have less and less signals, right? We're going to go away from this, so we're not going to be able to easily or at all match a user across first-party supply to third-party supply. So what we're doing is modeled audiences here. If you allow me to draw here. So how do we do this? Let's just call this modeled audiences. So the idea is you start with a segment, right? Of first-party data. Whether it's ours, whether it's another publisher, another brand. The idea is you've got users here that have something in common. They all have, for example, these traits in common. So think of like you got the wider circle, and then within that circle you have like a sub-circle of traits that everyone here in that segment has in common. The idea of modeling is, okay, let's look for these traits elsewhere. So here I'm going to draw a line of, this is like in the wild request, in the wild traffic. It could be recognizable users or unrecognizable users. And we're seeing that these guys as well have the same traits as 90% or 95%, depending on the confidence levels you want. They have those traits in common. So the idea is we amplify this segment and we add this request pool or this user pool in the case where they're identifiable users, and we get the output of a modeled seg. And you get more traffic. So this approach uses both IDs when we got them, and when we don't got an ID, it uses probabilistic approaches. So all of the learnings that we make off of recognizing the user across all our properties,
You can use that then to model out potential users elsewhere.
Exactly. And a lot of it is not even, like, while we can use our approaches, we're also using signals in the wild like this.
Yeah.
These ones are quite useful as well, and they allow for a lot of level of confidence. But yeah, it gets enhanced with the addition of first-party data as a secret sauce.
Right. And given the fact that you've got access to this incredible supply of first-party data, you're able to do some pretty decent sort of probabilistic modeling around your users elsewhere.
Yeah.
So let's talk about frequency capping. It's a requisite for most advertisers, but how is the industry approaching this? Because it's a big concern. Obviously, you talked about the ability to target without an ID or a cookie.
Yes.
But what's to stop a person seeing 100 ads in the same day and killing the effectiveness of the advertising?
Exactly. So when you don't have when we talk about signal loss, right?
Yeah.
So without the third-party cookie ID, and with IDs being less and less present, exactly. So you end up with the problem of, like, I'm going to deliver ads to the targeted users that have an ID, but then in this wide array of traffic that doesn't have an ID, what do I do there? And I'm glad we're talking about frequency management, because it's been a bit of a topic that's kind of been under-talked about compared to a lot of the other topics, such as targeting and what we're going to do with the targeting problem. So glad we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Our approach to this is providing a solution called advanced frequency management.
Frequency management.
Yeah, advanced frequency management. So we're on our DSP. Essentially, we've developed the capability for any line item, any campaign that you have, start frequency capping on the addressable traffic, but also expand that to the unaddressable traffic.
Okay.
So essentially, solving that problem you just highlighted.
Right.
Let me illustrate how this happens.
Yes.
So let's start with something called site co-visitation data. Co-visitation data.
Right.
And here, we've got user 1, 2, 3. And this user is landing on site 1, site 2, and site 3. The idea here is we're looking at data that measures the likelihood of this user jumping from this site to this site to this site.
Yeah.
So let's give an example here. Like, there's 80% chance that they go in the same day on this site. And then there's like a 40% chance that they also go on this site. We're also looking at how many requests.
How do you make the probability of that? Is that information coming back from the publisher or
from the line item itself? So this is not magically happening. We're looking at the line item actually running and seeing the numbers on the first few hours or the first day of running.
Yeah.
And then we trigger what we call the bid request estimator. It's kind of like an engine that is looking at this and looking at complex formulas to start building, okay, we estimate that we're getting this number of requests from this number of users for this website. And then we're estimating that there's that these users are also landing here, and then a percentage of these are also landing here. So it's quite complex. I'm not going to try to make it as simple. Like, I'm trying to make it simple for the sake of
you're using specific data to estimate where users will be, or that segment of users will be during the lifetime of the campaign, right?
Based on the frequency cap of the campaign.
Okay, right.
So what we're going to do is, this bid request estimator looks at this data. So looks at let's call this site co-data, site co-visitation data. It looks at the frequency of the campaign, frequency cap of the campaign setting. So let's say it's like 5 imps per day. And it's looking at the delivery, like, this is coming from the delivery of the line item, right? So let's say we've got 24 hours worth of data.
Right.
And this 24 hours, we've basically run on addressable traffic.
Right.
After this, we're going to start to expand beyond. Mm-hmm. So looking at both of these things, and
so addressable traffic, you mean
where you have an ID?
Well, you have a specific ID, so
yes.
You're able to kind of like run it on sort of owned and operated stuff on Microsoft advertising. So
if the line item is targeting that, yes.
Yeah. And then you're able to extrapolate from that where the frequency capping will lie in the campaign with the wider supply pool.
Essentially, yes. So we're respecting the frequency cap when we have an addressable ID.
Yeah.
When we have a third-party cookie ID or industry ID or PP ID or whatever.
Yeah.
When we don't have that, we do an estimate a number of users. So we have essentially a synthetic ID, if you want.
Right, okay.
Synthetic ID. So what you're left with is a graph that looks like this. Let's just say this is the line item delivery. So you've got estimated number of impressions per user, or number. So yeah, essentially this is both for addressable users and non-addressable users.
Right.
And we're going to aim to hit the 5 imps per day, right? Because that's what the line item says.
Right.
Obviously, here we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Let's just say 3 here. Typically, a campaign would look something like a bell curve like this. Maybe a somewhat bell curve, so it's going to hit as much as it can here. That's a normal campaign that doesn't have AFM on, doesn't have our probabilistic frequency caps. What you're going to have once you enable advanced frequency caps is this. So more delivery, and most of the delivery will be here, but you will have a drop-off where potentially some estimated users will see 6 or a bit more. This is natural because we're using probability, so we cannot 100% guarantee.
So you have a range. So
Exactly.
there'll be some people that see more ads,
Yes.
maybe a few might see less, but you're kind of getting that range of yeah.
And the idea is like this would be unknown users, right?
Yeah,
So
most of those will be
all of them.
and they will have ID, yeah.
So the idea is we're unlocking more delivery. And yes, you might have, in some cases, users without an ID that will have seen the ad 1 or 2 more times, according to our estimations. But the goal is most of the delivery of the campaign, like according to like our formulas, will be sitting and seeing way less impressions than the frequency cap, or at the desired frequency cap limit. Thanks to all of this complex data that we've been running on the campaign as initial.
And that's available within the DSP. So basically you can turn it on, or is it standard in the DSP? How does it sort of work?
Right now it's standard on the DSP. So whenever you have a line item that you set up and you say, I want it to run across cookieless traffic, and I also have a frequency cap set, then it will run in the backend. Obviously, it will need a bit of time to actually calculate this because it's using line item delivery, right? It's not going to right away. I turn it on and then it will start delivering. It gets better as the delivery starts to come in. And the data, the site representation data starts to gets calculated by this engine right here.
Have you done it against interesting? Have you done a kind of like A/B test this versus sort of cookie-based stuff? I mean, are you seeing much difference between the two?
In most cases, so the difference will be more delivery, right?
Right.
And the idea is it's exposed how much traffic people are missing out on.
Right.
That's the best part of it.
Interesting.
So and we're also validating a lot. What a lot of us think is that.
So this could work across the likes of Safari, which is basically being ignored by a lot of people.
100%,
Interesting.
So if you're targeting, let's say, contextual segments.
Yeah.
So no ID involved, just brand safety, for example, or contextual data. And you have a frequency cap, and you start to turn on the. It's a button on our line item essentially that says I want to run on cookieless traffic. This starts to turn on, and you start to see more delivery right away.
And good performance as well.
Of course, because like this is looking at sites that make sense. So we're looking at things like win rate, looking at things like click rate.
Yeah.
And the campaign.
So basically, like the data you're getting from your DSP in terms of post campaign performance is being taken as a means to sort of help you model out these.
And as like the DSP's job in itself is to optimize, right?
100%.
And by nature, this tends to be cheaper traffic because we're talking about unaddressable traffic.
There you go. That's music to agencies and advertisers' ears. Cheaper traffic.
We're hoping it would be music to people's ears because there's a lot of potential here. And yes, we understand that like this is unaddressable today. So I gave a good example of a line item that is having contextual data on it. But if you set up a campaign that is targeting first-party data from the buy side, so third-party data from the sense, obviously you're going to struggle to even hit anything here. But there is a good use case for any campaign that is using sell-side data, like deals or contextual data.
Interesting.
For this, for
sure. There you go, viewers. Microsoft Advertising solving the cookieless problems. Thank you, Joe, for running through all those interesting features, particularly this one. This is going to be a popular one with a lot of buyers, and we'll have you again in next year, particularly around Privacy Sandbox. I want to get an interesting deep dive on that and how you guys approach it. But that was Trader Talk TV, and we will see you next time.